Life in Exeter was tranquil. I think. I think Exeter, believe it or not, was much more dull back then. You've got a lot more cool stuff here, and the high school wasn't as cool back then. But when I look back on it, I just think of all the good friends I made, and my family was really cool, and I remember the blizzards were really cold. And it's funny. I think that people, when they're in high school, sometimes they can't wait to get away from the place they grew up in. And I was a little bit like that. But then I realized just how great it was only after I went and lived other places. Absolutely nothing. Not a thing. No, I had a lot of good English teachers who taught me about what good writing was. And believe it or not, even writing comedy, you kind of have to pay attention to the rules of composition that you learned in school. It's not entirely useless. And a lot of the books and things that I read here, I still sort of draw on them or refer to them in the show. I learned how to do a little electrical wiring in electricity, even though my wife told me that I don't seem to show it. I don't have any technical aptitude around the house. But and I just learned what a great community this is and what that feels like.
Yeah.
Yeah, there were a lot of people. Specifically, that guy, Bruce Shaw, who introduced me, he was the principal here. And I remember him very well because he was also my English teacher. And he was very encouraging. He was mentioning that I ran a little comedy newspaper here, and I would often make fun of him. And I think some of the teachers told him that I shouldn't be allowed to do that, and he let me do it. And I'm always grateful to him for that.
Yeah.
You check facts. If you write an article, one thing about, like if you write an article in a magazine, there has to be a whole department that goes through the article, especially if it's an article that is sort of negative. Let's say you wrote an article about Stephen Harper, and you said that he killed a squirrel, and he ran over a woman, and he set a moose on fire, and he said all these terrible things about the Prime Minister. You would write that article, but then you have to make sure those facts are true, or he's going to sue you. So the article gets edited, and then it goes to the fact-checking department, and they go through every single fact, and they make phone calls. They go, is it true that Stephen Harper set fire to that moose? Is it true that he hit that woman with a car? And they check each one of those facts and make sure it's absolutely true so that there can't be a lawsuit. Because in journalism, you can be sued for something called libel, which is when somebody sues you because you've said something false about them and it injures their reputation. But the only real defense against libel, or the main defense against libel, is if it's true. So if it's true, you're fine. And Spy ran a lot of negative articles about people, so you had to make sure that the facts were true. Well, there were a lot of people who were writing in magazines in the early 90s who were interested in getting into TV. And there were also a lot more TV shows back then. The Conan O'Brien show started, and there was a show called Politically Incorrect with Bill Maher. And they were looking for writers over there. So I put together a package of jokes and different ideas for him to do on the show. And I sent it over, and I got a call, and I got the job, which is good because TV pays a lot better than magazines. So it's pretty good. I was a writer for a couple of years, and then I became the head writer. And so that was basically, I don't know how, do you know the show very well? Do you ever watch it?
Not too much. I have seen it before.
Well, you know that they do comedy at the top of the show, at the beginning of the show. They do about 10 minutes of comedy. He'll tell jokes about things in the news, and then he'll sit down at the desk and do a comedy segment where he'll hold up funny props or something like that. And that all has to be written. And so I would supervise that. Or if Dave, sometimes he goes out of the studio and talks to people, and I would sort of be behind the camera, like whispering to him, say this, or do this, or grab his funny wig, or whatever. And so that was a cool job. It was scary because he was a very demanding boss.
Yeah.
But he was sort of, when I was in South Huron, I used to come into school bleary-eyed because I was watching the David Letterman show the night before. I was such a big fan. So it was a dream come true to go work for him.
And it was he probably depended on you quite a bit then.
Quite a bit, but I don't mean to overstate my contribution. He's really funny himself, and he makes up tons of stuff. And I had 10 writers working for me. So sometimes they would write things, hand it to me, I'd say it, look like a genius, and then Dave would put it on the air.
Yeah.
So it's like bosses sometimes do. They take all the credit. Well, a lot of people at the Letterman show ended up going to The Simpsons. It was the original writing staff was mostly old Letterman people. Because at least at the time, the Letterman show, you have to work really long hours.
Yeah.
you have to go from like 10 in the morning till sometimes as late as midnight. And at least at the time, The Simpsons didn't have those long hours. And I'm a little lazy sometimes. And I also kind of decided that I wanted to move to California because I like to move around. So the opportunity came open. A friend of mine was working at The Simpsons, and he called me and said, "We have a job. Would you like to come, on a trial basis and see how you like it and see how we like you?" And I said, "What the heck? Let's go to California." It's a lot of laughs. We have a lot of trouble. You know how like sometimes when you're writing an essay in high school and you sit down and you just don't feel like starting, or you got the internet in front of you and you want to like just look at something on the internet, and you put it off and you put it off, and you call your friend. Well, imagine if that was how work functioned. We get in there at 10, we eat donuts, we bet on NFL football a lot. I've lost a lot of money on these bets. I'm thinking about betting on the Grey Cup. You follow football?
No, not too much.
Okay. But we just sort of goof around a lot, and then we sort of start brainstorming and thinking of funny things that would happen on the show, or funny things that happened to us when we were kids. Like I'll often contribute things that happen here in Exeter.
Oh, that's sweet.
Yeah, it's cool. And then we eventually get around to writing the stories. Well, I think a lot of people who love the show, they want to know what went into it and how it was produced. And it's kind of fun to reminisce about it because, the last DVD that came out, it was from 8 years ago. The show's from 8 years ago. So those of us who worked on it get together and we talk about the show and how we came up with it, and just sort of give sometimes if there's something you really love, you want to know how it happened or what happened behind the scenes or why certain things happened. And so it gives people, they don't have to listen to it. They can just watch the show normally, but it gives a little extra information for people who want it. Well, I mean, sometimes it's more fun if you want to criticize something like the government or something. You start to sound a little shrill, and you start to. People get a little bored if you're just complaining straightforwardly, like, "Oh, we hate the government, we hate the war, and we hate this, and we hate that." And so sometimes it's. Have you heard the expression, "A spoonful of sugar makes the medicine go down"?
Mary Poppins?
Yeah, a little Mary Poppins for you. Sometimes if it's funny, you can get your message across a little more effectively. So if we criticize things, but we make it funny. And we can sort of hide it a little bit so that some people don't even get the joke. Yeah. But the people who can get the joke are like, "Wow, that's cool." Like they're kind of crediting me with being smart enough to get it. Yeah. So I think that's why it's so popular. It depends. More often than not, we approach the bands. It's funny. Sometimes it'll happen at the exact same time. One time, there was one creepy day where we wrote a part for the band, the Moody Blues, the old 60s band, and we had just put the finishing touches on it. We haven't told anyone we were writing it when someone came in the room and said, "Oh, we just got a letter from the Moody Blues. They want to be on the show." That was very weird. For the most part, we come up with ideas. Like we had a really cool episode where Homer went to rock and roll fantasy camp, and we had the Rolling Stones, we had Mick Jagger, Keith Richards, Elvis Costello, Lenny Kravitz, Tom Petty, and Brian Setzer. And we wrote so many parts because we thought, well, maybe we'll get one of those people, if not two at most. And they all said yes. So they're all in the episode together, and it's fantastic.
That's sweet.
People, especially people who have kids, they really want to do the show because the kids respect them more. Like, you know who Tony Blair is? He was the Prime Minister of Britain for a long time. Okay. He did The Simpsons because he said that his kids weren't impressed that he was Prime Minister, but they were impressed that he was on The Simpsons.
That's cool.
That was cool. It's very nice when a lot of these awards are given out by your peers. And so when somebody says, "Oh, you did a really good job on this show. We want to give you this award. We thought you wrote the best cartoon this year." It feels really good. And you feel like, "Oh, okay, all that hard work we did really meant something, and it really connected with somebody other than ourselves." And so, I mean, you're in a band. You want the audience. You want to connect with your audience. Like, you want at least some of the people. You want the cool kids to be like, "Yeah, I love that band with no name. They're awesome." When you play your Zeppelin medley, which I won't tell anyone about. No one knows what the Zeppelin medley, which is going to be awesome. Okay, here's what I think you should do. You start with Whole Lotta Love. You go on to Rock and Roll. You do a little Stairway, but just a little Stairway. But then you fake them out, and you go into Kashmir. And then you come back to Living, Loving, She's Just a Woman. And then you go right back to Stairway to finish. That's my suggestion.
Okay.
All right?
I'll mention it to the band.
Okay, please do. All right. I'm relaxing. I got no more energy left. I'm on strike right now because there's a writer's strike going on.
Yeah.
And so what's next is enjoying some time off, working on the picket line. Hopefully, maybe I'll do some Christmas shopping. I'm also trying to write a movie, which I'd love to see produced someday, and doing some internet stuff. So, I love to write, and writers will always tell you that they would do it even if they didn't get paid for it.
Yeah.
And I'm like that too. So I'm sure that I will keep writing for the rest of my career.
Oh, that's good. Thanks for coming to talk to us today.
My pleasure. Thanks, Joe.